All right, we are live. I always like that intro. So, Filip, how are you, man? Welcome.
Well, I'm great, and thanks so much for inviting me, Tim. It's always great to talk with you, and you know this.
Same here. When we don't do it in cafes with beers, we do it virtually, right? Let's just make it happen as often as we can.
Yeah, it's 2023, so all you need is just putting on some VR goggles, and we can meet in a cafe as well.
Oh boy, I have a Quest 2, so who knows? Maybe we can try that. I have to put it on again. I haven't used it in a long time.
Oh, my friend has a VR headset, but to be honest, like the only things that I saw was things like Beat Saber or this boxing game, which
Yeah.
is terrible graphics, but it's quite good for fitness, really. Like I hate cardio, and this is a good replacement. Anyway,
I have that game. I probably should just do it. I haven't really played it. Anyways, on to the the business of the day. So we are doing Composable without compromise, and we have for 2023 actually changed up our format a little bit. We came up with 6 questions that we're going to ask every guest, and they're going to be the same questions, and then we can see how different guests actually reply to these. But before we dive in, can you introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, where you live, stuff like that?
issue number. Yeah, so I'm Filip Rakowski. I'm a CTO and co-founder of Vue Storefront, and basically most of my career is e-commerce and Vue.js. So if you don't know what Vue Storefront is, I think the easiest way to describe it is basically a set of tools or a platform to build e-commerce frontends. So these days, we no longer have this luxury of just putting a monolith out of the wild with everything out of the box. Some call it luxury, some call it a curse. Right now, we have to compose everything. And the problem is, it's very hard to craft a front end that has like everything out of the box, because there are so many vendors. We're going to talk about this today anyway, but there are so many vendors that it's basically impossible to have something that is suiting all of those things. So Vue Storefront does exactly that. We really accelerate the process of building storefronts. We mitigate the risks and basically try to do as much as possible for you.
Yeah, so to me, it actually sounds like... Sorry, go on. What?
Was it a good ad?
Yeah, I think so. I think it fits. And what I like about this, it's like from developers for developers, right? And I think that's something we all want, an accelerator that doesn't suck. Anyways, let's go into these questions. I'm going to put a question on the screen, and then we go over it, and then you answer. And then if anybody in the audience has a comment or a question or whatever, please put it in the comments. I'll put that on the screen as well. So let's go to the first question. So what is an unexpected or surprising outcome from transitioning from a monolith to composable architecture?
Yeah, and like the hard thing about this question is like defining what is surprising outcome, because the truth is, like, when anyone is transitioning into composable these days, they're doing this for the first time. So almost everything is surprising except the things that were pitched by the vendor or by their agency. But to me, like from the vendor perspective, the thing that was surprising that I observed on the projects is that when you're migrating from a monolith, which is a single code base, to composable, with a dozen of code bases probably, and a lot of more complexity, you actually need fewer developers. And the reason behind that is that most of the things that you have, you're just not maintaining anymore. Oh, lovely. I think my neighbor is starting to drill. But
there you go.
I have
part of live streams.
Yeah, so that was the biggest surprise. Like, even though you're moving to much more complex system, even though there's much more moving parts, you actually need fewer developers, because the business people, they are responsible for maintaining a lot of those things, because they are just services. They just deliver you an API. And as a developer, you don't even have access to what's inside. On the opposite side, when we take probably the most popularly brought example of a monolith, which is Magento, you just have a huge code base with dozens of modules. And if you want to change something, you're not clicking through an admin panel. You have to develop this. And this requires a lot of work. And this is something that, on the intuition level, you could say that moving from a simpler system to a more complex system will require more developers, but it's actually the opposite.
Wow, that is an awesome answer. I did not expect this. And now that I think about it, I think you're right, because there's just less. I don't know. I'm not gonna pollute your answer with whatever I'm thinking. This works. Oh, and I see we actually have a comment, so let's have a look. Oh, there we go. That is one hell of a comment. Thank you and welcome, and thank you for watching. Let's go back to the second question now. So, what would it be if you had to advise agency or SaaS company executives?
Yeah, so actually this is something I even had a talk about recently on Vue Toronto. So what I see in every industry, is that it is very much buzzword driven and marketing driven. And I'd say don't trust buzzwords, don't trust marketing claims, dig deeper, understand the broader context, understand the nuances. Because the truth is, this is what matters. This is what really matters. Like the nuances usually decide if a solution is good or not. So you won't see this at first glance. You won't see this by having a problem, going to the internet, googling the problem, finding a tool that is solving that. Like that, this does not mean that it's a solution to all your problems. There are no such things. There are no things that are a solution to all problems. Every solution has drawbacks, really, and your goal as a decision maker is not to blindly adapt a technology tempted by its potential value, but more like understand those drawbacks and really carefully wait if the return of investment is actually worth them. Because I will give you an example from the headless space and Magento space, where I was quite active in 2017. So this is exactly the time when the term headless was actually forged and started to become mainstream. And it happened because Google was pushing progressive web apps very heavily. And yeah, they were associating progressive web apps in general with like a modern application, single page applications, even though it doesn't have to be like that. This is how it was associated. And progressive web apps, they were promising amazing performance. They were promising amazing engagement. And, at that time, we had a lot of people that were quite unhappy with their monoliths. So imagine on the one side, you have a group of people that are very unhappy with their current solution. On the other hand, you have huge company with a huge reputation and respect saying, hey, this is a solution to all of your problems. So a lot of companies, really a lot of companies, blindly migrated to headless without either even acknowledging like what is the exact value of headless architecture, because they were promising mostly performance. It's not performance. It can be performance, but it's not the biggest selling point. So we had all of those agencies migrating, all of those vendors migrating. And then what they were realizing is that, hey, like you still have performance bottlenecks on a headless architecture. What you get is actually a clean start, so you can ruin it again. And this is exactly what they were doing because they had zero domain expertise. They just blindly adopted a technology.
So it's greenfield ruining. I love it.
Yeah, and what we have right now is a lot of those merchants, a lot of those agencies, they're migrating back to monolith because what they realize is that the problem was somewhere else. And there are so many challenges with the headless architecture that migrating from a monolith to headless just purely for performance reasons, in most of the cases, I'm not saying in all, but in most of the cases, is trying to, is choosing the wrong solution to a problem. Because there's a lot of challenges and a lot of drawbacks of headless architecture. And I would say migrating there purely to improve performance is not worth it for most of the cases.
There you go. I think you speak big truth here, because we're looking at, like, especially where I work at Uniform, right? Where we look at all these headless things and how do you actually then put them together and then still have great performance, but also have content editors be happy. If you don't have any sort of orchestration layer, you just put stuff together in code, you're building something that's a nightmare. So it's exactly like now we're like 2-3 years after the story that you were telling, and it's still happening. And I've seen people go back to Shopify and then actually use their out-of-the-box templates again, right? Because it's easier somehow. So you have to be quite mature to be able to do this.
Exactly, and I think it was... Continue?
Hold on.
Okay.
Go on.
I mean, I think it was even worse with that market because we were all early adopters and there was really no data to validate if this is true or not. So the only way actually to have any kind of validation was trusting someone who we hope has a domain expertise, which was Google at that time. And we all see where it went.
Honestly, I've built my fair share of PWAs, and we used all these kind of fun tools, but the amount of smartness you had to throw at it to actually make it perform was it was almost not worth it, right? All right,
Yeah.
on to the next one. This one is fun. So, if you could wave a magic wand and change something in our space, what would it be?
Well, and this question is very much connected to the previous one, actually, because to me, this whole idea behind composable architecture is absolutely great. Like for large e-commerces, for large companies that earn a lot of money on their software, even a very small adjustment can literally result in millions of dollars of revenue. So it's great that right now companies are able to really fine-tune their stack and find tools, find vendors that exactly fit their needs. But it comes with a cost. Like everything comes with a cost, and this is also something I'm trying to advocate for, to make more conscious decisions. And this cost is complexity. So making all of those things work together, making sure that they are not only providing a good experience to the developers that are working in the front end, but also good performance, that they are connected together well, that there are no security risks, that everything is properly balanced regarding the infrastructure requirements. Wow, it's tough. It's really tough. And I think, despite composable commerce being great, this is a huge, huge downside. But my magic wand in this case is Vue Storefront. And I think you could say almost the same about Uniform. Like our goal is basically, to create those orchestration layers and those accelerators and those abstractions that actually, do the heavy lifting for you and allow you to really focus on getting things done. And on the other hand, there's also Mach Alliance. Like right now, I would say that the ecosystem is wild. There are no standardizations. There are no contracts for how should you integrate a search provider or how should you integrate a CMS provider. Maybe on CMS there's some kind of consensus, but I'm still seeing some weird things.
I'm seeing wild things even in that space, to be fair.
Yeah.
But
There's
it's quite
no
interesting.
consensus for payments. And that's
for example,
also
payments, address management, especially in the commerce side, it's so granular that's really hard. And the how you explained it is actually kind of funny because, like you said, I kept thinking about the DXE and how Uniform attacks this problem, and it kind of simplifies it. But there's never a fix because it's always hard. Because if you do an amazing orchestration with Uniform, but you still screw up your front end, you're still not there. Right? And if you do an amazing thing with Vue Storefront and you screw up however all the data gets in there, it's also not working. So it's never fully correct, but we can get better at it. The one thing I don't think we can expect from the Mach Alliance is them telling us how to do it. There's not going to be any standards, I think. It's hard
to be honest, I've at least like the Tech Council, I know that they are working on some kind of standardization. Of course, it's super early right now, but I would love to see such things, because right now, you know this very well as well, because we are working in the same space, building very similar products. It's a nightmare. Like you could have 5 payment providers and each of them is integrated in a completely different way. Some of them are on the front end, some of them are on the back end, some of them require a middleware, some of them, require you to send a pigeon with a confirmation. Like it's crazy, really.
I've seen some crazy stuff in iframes and like, oh man, there's a lot there. Exactly. So the magic wand is to sanitize everything so it's always the same. I like that.
Yeah. So in this case, my 2 magic wands are Mach Alliance. Like I'm a part of the Tech Council and I'm pretty excited about all the things that they are doing, because they are tackling real problems. And another one is, a pretty big amount of VC money that was sent to Vue Storefront to actually solve those problems as well.
Awesome. All right, on to the next. So what bottlenecks have you seen in composable architectures? That could be any sort of bottlenecks, like from tech to process to whatever.
I mentioned one at the beginning, which is like the overall complexity, and I'm kind of bringing this up quite often, but I wouldn't be myself if I wouldn't bring up something different. which is performance. To be more precise, front-end performance. I think, in a simple words, it's broken these days. It's broken these days because of the way how we are building the front ends. It's broken because of the concept of single-page applications being so JavaScript heavy. And I would love this. I would love to see this being solved. And luckily, especially last year, we had a wave of software that is approaching this topic from a different angle. Like Quick is probably the best thing that would happen to web development when it comes to the performance, but also Astro, which on first glance is a meta framework like any other, but at the same time they have just one difference that is making it a completely a game changer. And this difference is that they are going static first and dynamic by default, instead of what everyone else are doing. So everyone else are implying that every component that you have on your application, it has to run JavaScript. Even if this is just a piece of text, you have to download the component, you have to execute the code, etc. It costs a lot and it slows down the website a lot. So this is a bottleneck that I would like to bring up because I think it's very concerning, but at the same time the future looks very bright.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've used Astro on a few occasions now, and then you can actually choose to sometimes have some JavaScript and otherwise not. It's almost like going back to the old days where you just add a script tag and attach some JavaScript, and that's the way to go. And what do you think about Next.js 13 actually moving to React server components that are by default server rather than client? Isn't that the same thing, or does it feel different to you?
I mean, the concept is the same, the execution is different. To be honest, I think I prefer the Astro approach because it's just much simpler. It's focused more on static. Of course, you can have an SSR mode, but in general, I believe that it should all be static, and it all can be static, really. Maybe with some small exceptions, but in general, most of the web can be static.
This is true. Yeah, because I think Next 13 wants to be SSR dynamic by default and static when you choose, right? So it is different.
Yes, slightly. I mean, just a disclaimer. I know Next.js 13 features only from YouTube because I haven't worked with it yet. Though I know Astro features very well, so I might be favoring it just because I had such a great developer experience.
Yeah, let's be honest, same for me. I had an amazing developer experience with Astro. Then again, I've recently learned Next when it was version 12, and it is great as well. Anyways, on to the next. So what feature of old technology would you like to bring back?
Well, it kicks nostalgia for sure. But if I would look at all the nice things I remember from the past and the things that brought me the biggest joy that I miss right now, it would for sure be a WYSIWYG building. Like when I was starting web development, and I was starting pretty early because I was like 13 or even 12, maybe even earlier. I don't really remember because it was perf. Yeah, I think something like that. I was making silly websites about cats. But the point is, I had zero knowledge about programming, really. Like I just downloaded Microsoft front page because I was a kid and I told myself I want to create a website, and I started hacking with it. And over time I was jumping to the code section more than to the WYSIWYG section, just because I wanted to learn. But this fun and this productivity coming from a WYSIWYG tool, it was great. And this is something I would love to see more. And luckily we see more of this. Right now it has a fancy name, no code. Everyone are wowing, everyone are wondering if this is the future. But hey, we had no code before. But then responsive design kicked in, and it became much harder to actually create a no-code tool that was taking this into account. So we had a short break, and right now it's coming back. So I would love to see more no-code. And with CMSs these days, like Storyblok, like Builder.io, I think it's really possible to implement on almost any website. Also, I know that Uniform is cooking some things around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're coming out soon with some really interesting visual editor because people need visual stuff. Let's be honest. It's the way to go. But just walking back to like the Dreamweaver days, remember it would output tables and it would like have spacer GIFs and stuff like the crazy things it would do. That was
Yeah,
good fun, man. I remember these times.
I remember them very well. So I was using this Microsoft front page. I had this,
Yeah.
classic table-based website. I was using actually a crop of my cat as a repeated background. I remember it
Oh
quite well.
boy.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun, and all of this without knowing anything about HTML, CSS.
There you go. Maybe a sub question on this. Let's say we are looking at tools like Webflow and Builder and all these like more granular options that you get to choose from when you build with these tools. Do you think it goes too far for content editors to actually work with it? Do you have to be a developer to get it? What is your opinion here?
I don't think you have to be a developer to get it. I think exactly like the purpose of these tools, I think, is to bring the possibilities that were reserved to the developers, to the people that don't know how to code. And I think this is great. Though I think that people that are making those websites, they should have at least a basic knowledge about programming, about performance, about accessibility, because like the developers craft components and they can create great components, and marketing people are using them, but it doesn't mean that the website will be good if the components are good. Actually, you could,
Exactly.
for example, you can have a very, very long list that is basically hanging your website when rendering, or you could have a lot of components and each of those components is fetching data. Like, you have to train your marketing team, actually, maybe not always about how things work and how to optimize, etc., but at least how to measure and how to see if something goes wrong and when they should actually reach out to the development team.
Yeah, this is kind of why I like the story block / uniform approach, which is not super granular, but close enough to make it visual. I think it's like contextual editing. I think that's the safest bet here. Anyways, on
True.
to the next. This one is also fun for me. So we're not like we always ask questions like, how would you explain XYZ to your grandma? We're not going to ask it like this. So how would you explain composable architectures to a 15-year-old who is a digital native, who has TikTok and understands all the swipes, right?
Yeah.
How do you explain it to them?
So the funny thing is I have a sister and she's 17 years old, so almost. And knowing how she operates, knowing how knowledgeable she is with basically everything digital, to be honest, I don't think I would need to think a lot about figuring out how to explain this to her, because they know how servers work. They know
Okay,
a lot about how the web works, which is great.
that's
But
awesome.
what I would like to, if I would like to explain this, I would try to explain this more from the problem perspective than from the architectural perspective, because
Okay.
technically they are much better than us. Like, we are dinosaurs, really.
Oh yeah.
Let's have fun here until we can, because we'll probably be relics of the past very soon. Uh, so the analogy
Hey,
that I
Alex.
would like to use is, hey, is probably a sushi set, like a pre-made sushi
Okay.
set. I like to make sushi from time to time, though the last time was years ago. I remember doing that, and you basically had two options. One, you're going to the grocery store, you're buying a pre-made sushi set, and it has everything. Like, it has everything that you need to make sushi except the fish itself. And if you are a sushi connoisseur, like for example Evan, you will really notice the quality of that. Like,
Yeah, sure.
you don't really have any choice about, okay, maybe I would like my nori from a different type of nori, or nori from a different supplier, or maybe I want a different rice because it tastes better with a salmon. Like, you can't do this. You just have one sushi set. It will always have the same taste. And from one angle, it's great because you're just going there, buying it, and you can make it. But if you really want to cook something that is super delicious and special and the best possible, this is just not the way to go. You have to buy all the ingredients separately. And this
Yeah.
is exactly what Composable is to me.
I love it. And it's actually really close to my sandwich analogy that I spoke about, I think,
Yeah.
last year at some conferences. The sushi is better. It also fits the Generation C better, I think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's true.
awesome. So I have one last question, and this one is going to be fun, but I'm not sure how it will work. Here we go. There's an experiment. So do you have a fun question for the next guest? And I actually don't know exactly who our next guest will be yet. But
Oh,
it will
really?
be about composable stuff, right? About architectures and things like that.
Yeah, so I actually had, I was thinking yesterday about that. So I would give this question. So will content management systems become a competitor to the orchestration software at some point? Because from my perspective, they are going into this direction.
All right. Great question. I have answers and opinions on this already.
I know.
Wait, let's see. There might be Oh, here. Sergi has something here. McDonald's as a headless commerce. That was supposed to be one of my blog posts. Yeah, man. Like this analogy keeps working everywhere, and I love that we keep using it. It's awesome. So when we talk about this, like will CMSs actually be competitors to orchestration? What about high graph? They are literally are it already.
Exactly.
However,
Exactly.
what you should
Exactly.
know, I just had another live stream just before this where we were talking between the differences between going from DXP to DXC to this more composable thing. And if you are a CMS and you're going into the composable space, you become much more of like an API aggregator kind of thing. And a, a composable needs a little bit more, I think. So they might become a BFF, like a backend for frontend, right? But that is not also a fully composable orchestration system. So you need more things together to be that full thing. And I think personally, CMSs will go in the space, but never fully become it because it's still a CMS at the center, which is not the idea of composable.
Yeah, that's true on one hand, but on the other hand, if you take a look how the current industry is evolving, like everyone at some point will have a product for the orchestration because it's
They have to.
inevitable. Like you don't
Yeah,
want to be the part that is easy to replace, right? So
exactly.
the
They want to be
e-commerce platform,
sticky.
yeah,
Yeah,
the e-commerce
because
platform for
think about
sure.
it.
The CMSs, they are already doing this. So right now, imagine the architecture in the future when we have one orchestration stacked on another orchestration on
Oh
another
boy.
orchestration. And
Oh
at the
boy.
same time, the companies, they will be there, they will be partners and competitors at the same time. So I'm very curious how the market would solve that because it's fascinating from the partnerships perspective. It's fascinating from the software perspective. It's generally fascinating.
I think that's a great question. I will be asking it to the next person. What interests me here is how much freedom are they going to give when they go and do this orchestration business, right? I think that might be it, because lots of CMSs that do this now actually solve short-term problems in their CMS to have a bigger scope with an audience and become sticky. But when
Mm-hmm.
you look at a place like Uniform, we don't solve the things that are tiny problems right now, but the big problems for next year. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you compare the two, the Uniform approach will generally be the most idealistic one. And it will always work for your future. But do you need it right now? Do you need like an in-between tool quickly? Right. So that's going to be a very interesting thing to say.
Yeah, I agree. And I also fully agree that, the orchestration layer, it shouldn't be tightly coupled to any part of your software. Like we are kind of moving from a moment that was platform centric around e-commerce to a moment where e-commerce is just a commodity, one of the vendors that you're plugging in. So right now,
Yeah.
the center is actually the orchestration, maybe also the front end, which kind of orchestrates, but definitely not an e-commerce platform. So
Yeah.
ideally, you would like to be dependent, like a full, because this is a part that you're kind of locked in, really. So ideally, you would like to be dependent on something that is not changing that much over time, and that is not influencing the way how do you business, right? E-commerce
Yeah.
platform, it is like they could change pricing, they could change features, they could change direction, but orchestration layer, like what would be the pivot in the future? Maybe they
Um,
will change pricing.
More features on top, I guess.
Yeah.
like extra insights or webhook specializations. So we have a few comments. I'm going to put them on. Oh, first we have Lucy. This is not
hey.
a super constructive part to our question, but what's up, Lucy? Thank you for coming. So here we have Mickey. Dude, that is some fancy profile picture. Looking sharp, my friend. So he says, I think likely there will be a number of incomplete solutions stacked together, which makes a lot of sense to me, as there are now, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is what I wanted to say. It is exactly like this now. Like, maybe not for every software, but for a large part of this, like everyone are early adopters. It's like an industry of startups and new companies.
Yeah.
Sometimes old companies being completely new things, which is kind of the same.
Yeah. And so next one from Alex. As long as a CMS is the cash cow for headless CMS vendor, they have a horse in the race, defeating the idea of vendor agnostic nature or a composition platform. Yeah, very true. Right. But what we're seeing now with Uniform is that even though the CMSs don't always like us taking a bit of business from them, they are also realizing now that if they want to be in the race for bigger RFPs, they need an orchestration part next to it. So we have these partners that are sometimes annoyed and sometimes love us, and then it's always moving, and then we get deals, which is a very interesting approach to this whole thing. So I want to go back next year and do this discussion again to see what changed.
Yeah, I'm also curious. As I said, like this is fascinating from the perspective of like there's clearly, a lot of conflicting things. On the one side, a very good potential for partnership and doing things together. On the other hand, some conflict of interest because the companies, they're overlapping more and more. They're starting in different places, but as soon as they grow to a certain size, they more or less overlap with a lot of features.
Exactly. It's just going to be whoever markets it the best and who is the least vendor lock-in like, I think will win this race. Thank you so much for your time. We did it in like 32 minutes, 50 seconds, which is solid. It's actually how I planned it. So I'm very happy that you answered the questions how I like them to be answered. So how can people follow you and find you?
Yeah, so there are many ways to do this. I'm on Twitter. My handle on Twitter is Rakowski. So, that's a nice trick, Tim. I'm gonna try this as well.
Okay, go for a trick. Yeah, I put it in my name. That works.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I wanted to do, but okay, never mind. So you can follow me on Twitter as Rakowski. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm actually starting my journey on LinkedIn right now. I don't really like the things that are happening on Twitter, so why not? And I'm quite impressed. So probably I will post more in there.
LinkedIn is becoming a market for me also. It's very interesting.
Yeah, so we will meet each other on LinkedIn. And I'm also running a developer newsletter. This is a Vue Storefront developer-centric newsletter, but it doesn't mean that it only has news about Vue Storefront. It's only me curating it, so I'm throwing a lot of stuff related to e-commerce, to web performance, and to be honest, like whatever I feel I want to put there. So if you go to my Twitter profile, you will find a link for the developer newsletter as well.
Awesome. I am subscribed, so I've read it. It's awesome. So everybody, when you're watching, subscribe. If you want to know more, sorry,
why you don't advertise your own newsletter?
I could, but maybe I'm not sure if that's for the stream, but you can if you want. So I'm running a newsletter called the DXE Industry Newsletter that I'm running through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is becoming this platform for us. It's great. It already, after the first iteration, it got like 400 subscribers, which blew me away. It's crazy. It's slowing down now, but if you want that, you can find it on LinkedIn. Just type DXE Industry Newsletter. For the rest, if you want to know more about Uniform, you can go to uniform.dev or go to uniform.to/Discord, because we would love everybody to be in there so we can have a lovely community and chat and do things like that. And I think we have reached the end. Thank you so much for everybody watching. Thank you, Filip. Hey, you changed your name. There we go.
Yeah, I found
it work. everybody take a quick peek at Filip's name, and then there you go. Thanks again, my friend. Speak soon.
Thanks so much. It was really an honor and pleasure, as always, to talk with you. And we see each other in Amsterdam, I guess. Bye-bye.
Yes, in like 4 or 5 weeks. Nice. Cheers, man. Bye.
Cheers.